Hello. How y'all doing? Good. What's funny is like maybe a couple of years ago, a friend of mine who was a friend of Jenny's kept saying, you gotta meet my friend, you gotta meet my friend, you gotta meet my friend. And finally I met his friend and we were like, we've been dancing in the same dance class next to each other for like a long time now. So the fact that there is a Rihanna song playing as I walk onto the stage at her conference is very apropos. So I'm a marketer, which might seem like an odd fit for this conversation. I'm a CMO, and as Jenny mentioned, in my last company, I grew the company from 45 million to 100 million customers in a couple years. I want to share with you a little bit today about how to apply what I know about engaging external audiences to your internal audiences. But I am also going to speak to you a little bit from personal experience, having been an employee at a couple of what I think of as kind of case study level startups. I was, I think, number 75 employee at Trulia.com. Do you guys know Trulia? Yeah, and then I was about number 35 employee at MyFitnessPal, which was, and both of those companies were as good as the startup story goes, right? We were great companies, amazing to work at. We grew, we scaled, we exited, we did what startups are supposed to do. So I have witnessed firsthand what it's like to be one of those uber-engaged startup employees who then becomes part of the mass exodus once the company grows and scales. Oh, listen to the ahs of recognition around this room. So from both a personal and a professional level, I want to talk to you a little bit about, I feel very well qualified to make a bold statement about work through a marketing lens. And the statement I'm going to make is this, that work has a PR problem. Work has a PR problem. And in backing up my statement, I'm going to quote from the esteemed social commentator Drew Carey. Drew Carey has been quoted as saying, so, you hate your job. There's a support group for that. It's called Everybody. And we meet at the bar. I believe it does not have to be this way. When you're scaling a business, it's really super common for the metrics that matter around people to be more, right? Hire the people, build out the org chart, use the money that the VCs invested in you to build the team, to do the work. And that is very necessary. It is also very analogous to a problem I see in marketing for the same kinds of companies, which is the overemphasis on growth, right? Companies are very focused from a marketing perspective on getting more users, getting more downloads, grow more, grow more, grow more. And the problem with that is that it comes often at the expense of a focus on engaging people once they get in and engaging the people that you already have. So you end up with this situation where you're growing large numbers of really disengaged people, right? I want to submit to you that the data says we are not, actually, let me take one step back. Any company, from what I've seen, and I've been in the Valley for a long time, any company of any stage in any industry will thrive if it repeatedly engages two audiences over and over and over again, customers and employees. You can't lose if you do those things well. Unfortunately, most companies are not doing either of those things very well. And I won't go through all the data that I usually use for customer engagement, but I will give you one data point on employee engagement. Gartner says that about 72% of American employees rank on the disengagement scale somewhere between kind of like, meh, and neutral, to toxically, actively hateful toward their employers. Toxic, active, hate. So you can buy growth, just like in marketing. You can growth hack, you can do product marketing. You can do the same thing with employees. You can pay people to come work for you. You can pay recruiters. You can pay referral bonuses. What you can't buy is their engagement. You can't pay for people to care about their work. You can't pay for them to stay engaged as a company scales over time. It is a deeply, deeply human problem how to get people to care about the work that they do. And so I submit that the only way we solve human problems is by paying attention to people and their humanity, right? Fixating and doubling down on what are the undying, deep down human aspirations that make people want to care about things and make them want to do the things that we need them to do. And what I know from my work with consumers is that one of the most powerfully motivating, undying human aspirations is the desire to live a better life. It's the desire to be healthier, wealthier, and wiser. I call these transformational aspirations. And when it comes to your internal audiences, the way that desire plays out is in a desire to find their right livelihood, right? A desire to do work that fulfills them and brings them more and ever closer to what they feel like they were put here on this planet to do. So I want to invite you today to look at your employees through this lens of transformation and to constantly challenge your leadership team and yourself with this question: how might you create a culture that engages people by helping them become the people that they want to be? Now, I'm going to really rapid fire give you 3 ideas, 3 things that I've seen work in a lot of companies at this stage. The first is to get and stay on purpose. Get your team on purpose, keep your team on purpose. People want to work on problems that are bigger than them, okay? And increasingly, people are tired of working on projects that are just like, I'm just working on a thing that makes more money for a company that has more money, that already has a lot of money. So I want to challenge you at every level of leadership internally to rethink what it is that you actually sell. Rethink why it is that your company exists. And I'm going to propose that if you do that rethink, think about it through this lens. Your company doesn't sell a product or service. Your company sells a transformation for your customers. It sells a transformation from having a high-level human problem to no longer having that problem. And once you shift and recalibrate the way that you and your leadership levels are thinking and talking about why you exist as a company, you can start to consistently engage your team around that customer problem, that high-level human scale problem. And you can begin to build elements of your customer's problem into every single pillar of culture in your company, from the way internal leaders are talking about what you do, to every employee review, even things like your HR recs. Your customer's problem should actually have a representation in all of those things, to how you set your 8 OKRs, how you set goals, what your product roadmap says, why are we building these things. Your customer's problem should be represented there. And when I talk about high-level human problems that your business exists to solve, I want to give you a few examples from companies that you'll know. So Trulia.com was a real estate search engine. But what we talked about internally was how to help people make the wisest possible decision on the biggest transaction they would ever make. And that's exciting to work on, right? And MyFitnessPal, we were essentially a calorie counting app. Nobody gets excited about helping people count calories, though. So what we talked about all the time and thought about and fixated on in every team in that company was, we were kind of mad at the status quo state of the world, which is that it's easier to live an unhealthy life than it is to live a healthy one. And so we got everyone excited all the time about righting that wrong, about reversing those forces. And the number one question I get when I talk about this stuff is, does this apply to B2B? And the best example that I know of, that I know all the details of, is Slack, right? Like Slack could talk about the problem that they solve as like group chat. That's not that exciting. But what they actually do, the way that they talk about the problem that they solve is, we exist to develop better teams, to reduce information overload, to manage stress, to bring stress down, and to tap into, to unlock the value of all of that untapped sort of hidden information that exists within almost every company. So that's my strategy 1, is get your team on purpose and keep them on purpose. Strategy 2 is to create a fear-free workplace. All right? So I'm a black church lady, y'all. If we're going to do two-way, we're going to have to do two-way. I might need someone to say amen. All right. Oh, this is my favorite audience. All right, creating a fear-free workplace. There are a couple things that happen. Well, who read Good to Great? Awesome. In Good to Great, there's a piece in there where he talks about this model of leadership that's like one genius to 1,000 workers. The teams that I've built, I've tried to take the lens of, how can I build a team around one genius to 1,000 geniuses, right? The thing about that is geniuses don't operate the same way that everybody else does. As you scale a company, 2 things happen. You First is, you can't, like I said, you can buy people, but you can't really just buy geniuses, right? Like geniuses can work anywhere. And when they choose a place to work, they want to work at places where they are being developed, where they are improving, and where the work that they do is developing and improving other people. The challenge is that as you scale, the other thing that happens is leaders get very stressed and they get very anxious about whether they can actually do what they said they could do and about what their role is going to be over time in the evolving organization. And very unfortunately, that anxiety tends to roll downhill. It causes leaders to constantly do things that blow up the conditions that are conducive to genius in an organization. Right? So they do things like they change strategy all the time so no one can really ever get any traction going on the things that they're trying to work on. They constantly demand I'm hearing all kinds of like little micro amens around this room. They constantly demand new reporting to assuage their own anxiety, and it is such a big distraction for the people who are trying to do the work that they've asked them to do. They yell. They create a snowball of anxiety. They paralyze good decision making, and they ultimately create a situation where people just kind of dread coming to work in the morning, right? Now, I have lots of thoughts about how to do this, how to create a fear-free workplace. What I'm going to do is, if you want, I wrote a whole chapter about this in my book, and I will email that PDF of that chapter to you if you email me. So my email is tara@transformationalconsumer.com. And if you even just put Culture Conference in the subject line, I'll just email it right back to you. The other big recommendation I would tell you to read is this book by Henry Cloud called Boundaries for Leaders. The book is all about how to create conditions conducive to geniuses doing great work and how to maintain them. But chief among the things that I recommend and that Henry Cloud recommends is this. It's requiring your leaders to practice the sort of personal growth and development work that it takes for them to maintain emotional groundedness, right? For them to be able to maintain independent thinking regardless of what stress they're under that day. And learning starting to teach them, cultivate within your organization ways that you can teach them how to create conditions that are conducive to geniuses doing great work. Okay, the last thing, and I'll be quick here, is to remember that everything communicates. Everything communicates. I have been responsible for internal communications teams. The unfortunate sort of misnomer of that is that internal communications is not about what you say at all hands or the email you send. Employees are watching every single thing that your organization does, and they are deriving meaning from it, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, but that meaning influences how engaged they are on an everyday basis in their work. It influences when they start trying to find a job somewhere else, right? So they look not just at what we say, they look at what we do, and they look at things like who you hire for leadership, who you don't hire for leadership, who they don't see represented in leadership, the behavior your organization tolerates or ignores, the behavior that gets rewarded directly or indirectly. They also look at things like what does or doesn't make it onto the product roadmap. What makes it onto the product roadmap and never gets resourced? What are the goals that you set every quarter and miss every quarter? Right? These are things people, not only are they taking away from this meaning about what your company wants to be about and what your company stands for, they're taking away from it meaning about do I really want to spend the precious breaths of my life here? So when I left my last in-house role, I wrote a blog post that ended up being read by a lot of people, and it was called Why I Just Quit the Best Job I Ever Had. And in the post, I talked a lot about my personal purpose and my process of becoming clear on it. And I shared a lot about the consumer group that I market to, the transformational consumer, and how work is becoming part of the way they walk out their own personal growth journeys. But I also shared a lot about why it was the best job I'd ever had in the first place. And one of the reasons it was the best job I had at a company was that I was I was 100% crystal clear on what I was there to do, and I was fully empowered and resourced to do it. I knew what my job was. I was able to build the team I needed to, build the programs I needed to, get the support from other teams I needed to, and my job was to grow that app to have hundreds of millions of customers, and that's what we did.